We're often jarred when our expectations don't line up with reality. Nowhere have I felt this more than when I'm ordering a fast food cheeseburger. You see that picture and the lettuce is crisp and the tomato is ripe and the bun is perfectly toasted, and then you get this tiny little cardboard box filled with this soggy thing with brown lettuce and this soggy tomato, and it's hard not to be a little bit jarred. You find you were hoping for something a little bit different. Now, the people of Israel had been waiting for centuries for God to do something. And in that waiting, they had started to form a mental image of the type of thing God would do. And these mental images were very different. For some, it would be this Rambo-like military leader who would take over the empire of Rome by force and establish a kingdom that wouldn't end. For some, it would be the vision of a new moral leader who would refresh their religious sensibilities. For some, it would be someone who would take them up to heaven or to some other place away from the troubles of the world. When they got their box, though, and opened it up, and it said on it, Christ, which means anointed one or chosen one, I think many of them would be surprised, particularly by his first actions in the Gospel of Mark. See, in the Gospel of Mark, one of the first things he does is not go to a Roman consulate to fight imperial power or build an army. No, he goes into a synagogue, which would be the equivalent of a small church in a small city. And there he confronts a man who is possessed by an impure spirit. It's as if to say, you think that all the problems that are hurting the world are outside these doors, but there is rot at the heart of what you have been doing. Now, one of the reasons we don't catch that is because the word spirit for us has often been moved to the realm of fairies and ghosts and dragons. But we still do use the word, and the ways that we use the word are instructive. We use it to describe the electric charge that goes through a crowd when somebody scores a shutout goal. We use it to describe somebody who participates with enthusiasm in the principles and values of an institution. We use it to describe getting caught up in and participating in something bigger than ourselves. Now, hearing this story initially, we might think that this man was just having an individual issue, that this impure spirit possession might be an early sign of mental health issues, and that ancient people didn't just quite fully understand these things yet. But for Scripture, spirits or the spiritual is a systems thing. It's something that has to do with long-term decisions made by individuals and groups of people. Spirits don't just possess these individuals, they're more often participated in. We can make choices that align us with the Spirit of God, or we can make choices that align us with the spiritual forces described as the enemy or the evil one. And we've experienced, I think, dark moments where we've seen these forces at work. We've seen young men arm themselves and walk into schools and destroy as much life as they possibly can, including their own. And yes, there are physical, chemical, biological, psychological reasons why these things happen, but there's also the long-term neglect of our society on the oppression of young people and the things that they're going through. There's a long-term participation in forces other than the Spirit of God. When officers dressed in the authority of the land perform undue acts of violence on people of color, we're seeing individual mental health issues and histories of violence, but we're also seeing long-term participation of our nation in the forces of evil. Spirits are a systems thing. It has to do with all of us as a group. So this man acting out in this one synagogue stands for the fact that there is something broken in the whole system and whole understanding that Jesus is entering into. And that what Jesus is there to do is not just solve individual problems, but through confronting these individual problems, change the whole system. See, we're reminded by this, though, that the problems are not just out there. They're here, and they're here. In the words of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, if only there were evil people out there and all that it took was to round up those evil people and destroy them. But the line between good and evil runs through the heart of every person. And which of us are willing to cut out a piece of our own heart? But the actual point of this story is not just that the problems facing us are sometimes in realms that we can't fully comprehend and can't see, but that the solution lies in a power and authority greater than ours. Because we don't ever catch Jesus breaking much of a sweat fighting spirits. Because Jesus is demonstrated as somebody who has authority, real power that can change and transform the long-term choices that are being made by people in societies. We see him at the center of things in the temple in Jerusalem, speaking truth to power. But more often we catch him in these small, dusty rural churches, healing people, correcting them. And in these individual changes, he moved society. In the transformation of these individual hearts with his authority, he released a new and fresh wind. And that the solution is not just better ideas or better policies, but a radical renovation of our hearts. And that the person to do that radical renovation, the one who has the authority to make that change, is Jesus. So where have you felt hung up? Where have you felt frustrated and confused when you look out in the world? Maybe the invitation to all of us is to allow ourselves to understand that while the problems may be in the realms of things we can't see and don't fully comprehend, there is somebody who does have the power, who does have the authority to move us forward. And the invitation is where we feel blockages in our own lives and in the world around us, to call upon and invite the authority of Jesus to transform our lives, and through us and those around us, to transform our world.